Hello?
Yeah,
Hello?
I see there's a couple hands.
Yes.
You can hear us?
Yes.
Okay, good. I
Can you hear me?
was trying to,
Yes.
yes, we can.
Okay. Okay.
I don't see my Zoom button that says I'm either muted or unmuted or as far as, oh, here it is, the audio settings. Okay.
Okay, we're going to get started. Welcome to the 2025 Heritage Trust Fund Grant Workshop. I'm going to attempt to launch some poll questions just to kind of get an idea of who we have here and to better assist with the workshop. So there should be two questions. One is what best describes you. Are the polls showing up?
Yes, they are, Bethany.
Okay, thank you. And I also have Katrina Ringler with us who will be monitoring the chat. And at any time, if you have questions, feel free to raise your hand and we will allow you to talk. So it looks like we've got a lot of nonprofits and individual property owners and a lot of first-time grantees, grant rounds. Thank you for doing that.
Dana, did you have a question?
Yes, I did want to make it clear that I am with the Lincoln County Historical Museum. We have received a grant before, but I am new as director, so this is new for me.
Okay, great. Thank you. Happy to have you. Okay, so let's get started.
Scott, did you have a question? Did you have a question, Scott? You can talk.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, it says oh, it just says it's disabled my chat. I just wanted to make sure you got my response.
Oh, okay. I'll double check. Sometimes the chat gets disabled when we don't realize it. So I'll try to enable that for everybody.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so the Heritage Trust Fund was created in 1990. We awarded our first round of grants in 91. We've awarded over $31 million to date, which is great. And our funding source is through the Register of Deeds, so every county contributes. It's a per page fee collected through the Register of Deeds. No county pays more than $30,000 in one calendar year. And statute mandates that funds must be dispersed across Kansas since every county contributes. And then half of the funds each year need to go to a city, county, or historical society. Through this program, the Kansas Historical Society has the opportunity to help communities realize their preservation goals and increase interest in their historic resources. So just some kind of facts about the program. The maximum award is 100,000. We increased that from 90,000 a couple years ago. The minimal award is 5,000. So if you have a smaller project, it doesn't hurt to apply. So anywhere from 5,000 to 100,000. For most people, it's going to be an 80% reimbursement of costs. This is a reimbursement program. Applicants are expected to pay for all consultant and construction costs as they come due, and then we will reimburse 80% upon receipt of documentation of completed work and evidence of payment by the applicant. The recipient needs to provide at least 20% match. It has to be a cash match. There's not donated or indirect matches. And at minimum, you need to have documented at least the 20% match by the November 1st deadline. For-profit corporations are a little different. They have a 50-50 match. And they need to demonstrate that they have the 50% match. So what properties are eligible? The property needs to be listed on the National Register of Historic Places, in the Register of Historic Kansas Places, or contributing to a district. Properties can't be owned by the state or federal government. They're not eligible. And I will note that most districts do have non-historic or non-contributing properties within their districts. So non-contributing properties within historic districts are not eligible. If you're unsure of the status of your property, you can feel free to reach out to us. I'll have our contact information at the end of the webinar. Or you can look online in our searchable database, KHRI. That's the Kansas Historic Resource Inventory. And remember how I said those for-profit owners need to have a 50-50 match? They also need to demonstrate that the property's continued existence is threatened, or that the property's rehabilitation is not economically feasible without grant assistance. So if you are a for-profit corporation, you will have to give a little bit more explanation onto why you deserve the grant. And the grant committee will take that into consideration. So what are some eligible activities? There's 4 treatments in historic preservation: rehabilitation, restoration, preservation, and we also have some non-construction activities that are eligible. So rehabilitation would be like upgrading the mechanical systems or remodeling a bathroom. Restoration would be reconstructing a missing feature, like a bell tower, but you would need to provide documentation for that. Preservation would be maintaining or repairing historic materials as is, activities that halt deterioration, even erosion control on archaeological sites. And then some of the non-construction activities that are eligible are historic structures reports to kind of give you a plan, maintenance plans or construction plans. And all work does need to meet the Secretary of Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties. I've included a link there. There's also more information provided in the program information that is on the grant website. And while all of these activities are eligible, some are more successful than others. In general, proposals to repair or preserve the exterior envelope of the building compete better than projects that are simply to update a stable and sound building. This is a very competitive grant, and so the grant committee has to take in all factors when determining awards. No work should begin on the project until the grant awards are announced. Grant awards are announced in February of 2025. The grant administrator needs to attend an orientation session, and a grant agreement needs to be signed before physical work can begin. Some ineligible activities, additions, interpretive displays, equipment, any major reconstruction, so anything more than, say, a porch or a missing cornice component, purchasing property, relocation of structures, grant administration expenses, and then general maintenance. General maintenance is at the discretion of the grant review committee. And keep in mind that there are certain things that all property owners are expected to do towards maintaining their buildings. For example, cleaning gutters or touching up paint. And again, you can feel free to look through the program information for additional ineligible activities. As a reminder, this is a reimbursement program. Grantees must maintain cash flow and pay your contracts as they come due. Your grant agreement or your agreement is going to be between the contractor and yourself. And then you will seek reimbursement from us. You will be required to maintain documentation of all documents as part of your grant, especially documenting payment. And then you'll need to provide photographic documentation of the work. And then we do reimburse we try to process reimbursement requests as quickly as possible. So what happens if you're awarded a grant? As I was saying, there's a grant agreement that we have between the property owner and the Kansas Historical Society that lays out the scope of work, the schedule, reimbursement requirements, and other conditions of the award. The scope of work, schedule, and budget are drawn directly from your application. So the better detail you can provide in your application, if awarded, will provide a better detailed grant agreement. We also provide orientation to the grant administrator, and then we do require monthly progress reports. And again, no project work can begin until the project agreement is signed. Physical work generally won't begin any sooner than summer of 2025 once you get through the whole process, because competitive bidding is required as part of this program. So what are the deadlines? The grant deadline is November 1st, 2024. It's at 11:59 p.m. It's an online application. You can see more program information and the link for the application at ks.org/14617. Grants are awarded, like I said, in February of 2025, and this is at a regular Historic Sites Board of Review meeting. And then once they're awarded, we start going through the process of getting all of that preliminary work, grant agreement, orientation, and that sort of thing taken care of. So like I said, applications will be accepted through 11:59 p.m. on November 1st via the online application. You will be able to save a draft and continue the application later. The save and resume capability of FormStack produces a web link that you must save to access your application again. The link is only good for 30 days. We do strongly encourage you to look through the full application before beginning to put in text. You can even utilize a Word document to save your draft narratives and application information before pasting it onto the online form. If you add attachments, then choose to save and resume. The attachments will not come back in the save and resume later. Do we have any questions so far?
I'm not seeing any, and as far as I can tell, the chat is available to everyone now. So if you are not able to chat, please raise your hand and let us know.
Thank you. So application materials, the program information is posted on the grant website. We encourage you to please carefully read through the whole application before filling it out. They do have to be submitted online through the FormStack platform. And I'm going to go step by step through the application now. So when you go to the grant website, kshs.org /14617, it'll bring you to the Heritage Trust Fund landing page. Down here is the Apply Here button. There's a copy of the assurances, which you'll have to sign at the end of the application. And then the program information, which gives a comprehensive explanation of the whole program. So once you click apply here, the button's going to take you to the grant application. It gives you a link to search the Register of Historic Places or the Register of Historic Kansas Places. And it also gives you a link back to the grant page with the program information. And then here's our contact information if you have questions or issues while submitting the application. So the first part of this application is just general grant application information. The applicant needs to be the legal owner of the property as of November 1st, 2024, and remain the owner throughout the duration of the project, plus 5 years from the date of the project closeout. If the property has more than one owner, all parties must provide proof of agreement with the application, and if funded, an agreement with the project agreement. You are required to provide proof of current ownership. The name of the property owner needs to be the name of the legal ownership that you provide as the attachment. Whether that's an individual, a trust, an LLC, etc. It needs to match. Also, there's the SAM unique entity identification number. An active SAM UEI is required for everyone besides owners that are individuals. And you can search that at sam.gov. If you previously had a DUNS number, you may have a UEI assigned, but in order to make it active, you need to go into sam.gov and register. You're not required to have the active UEI by November 1st. That would be great, but it does need to be in process. The next section is about the historic property that you're applying for. So we need you to give the historic property name if it has one, and you can look at our Kansas Historic Resource Inventory to see if it has a historic name. And there's a link provided in the application. And then the physical address of the historic property, which would be the street address, including zip code, city and county in which the property is located. And then we also ask for the congressional district for the location of the property. And you can find that at the link provided in the application. So the grant administrator is the main point of contact for the grant management. The state statute created this program requires that the grant committee take into consideration the administrative ability of the applicant when considering grant awards. So this section is where you're going to talk about that. We would like to have only one point of contact on the project. If funded, make sure that person knows that they are the administrator that you're putting in the application and that they want the job of grant administrator. And why are they suitable for this role? This should be someone who can work with the project team and HTF staff. They can keep records, provide monthly progress reports, and someone you expect to remain throughout the entire project, if possible. The grant administrator is the one who would attend the orientation session once the grants are announced. And they are the main point of contact for us. And I will say that it could be the same person as the owner. It doesn't have to be a different person, but sometimes folks will have a different grant administrator. The next section is about the applicant. Are you an individual, city or county government, nonprofit, for-profit? If you aren't sure of your status, please contact the SHPO. There's also a space for other if none of the above apply. And then it's asking about the historic property status. So is the property listed as a National Historic Landmark, National Register individual? Is it contributing to a historic district? Or is it only on the Register of Historic Kansas Places? And again, if you aren't sure what your property listing is, you can call and we can find out for you. And then we do have a question about whether you're planning on utilizing the federal or state tax credit program. So there is intended to apply for both, intending to apply for state only, not intending to apply for historic tax credits, or maybe you already have an open tax credit project, and that would be helpful because then we can coordinate with the tax credit team on that. So now we're getting into the long answer portion of the application. Proposed project description. This is the SparksNotes version of your grant project to give the grant committee a quick view of what your project is. Make sure to keep your answers concise. There is a character limit on each box, but you don't need to fill the whole box if you feel you have provided enough information. This is an example of what you might put here. Funding is needed to address the 24 original wood windows in the Smith house. The windows are suffering from rot and deterioration. Simply put, it gives a quick overview of what you are requesting funding for. G is historical significance of the property. This question requires you to give a written account and justification of your project. Make sure your answers are clear and concise so that anyone who's unfamiliar with your project can understand your objectives. Do not assume that the grant committee has seen your project, and we want them to understand the importance of the project. Convince them that you have planned and will be able to implement a successful project. And again, every building applying is going to be listed either on the state or national register. So you need to go beyond that. What makes your property special and worthy of grant funding? I'm going to pause here because it looks like we have a lot of questions in the chat.
Bethany, there was a good question about, are we eligible for the grant if we're in the application process of being listed to the National Register? So I just clarified that to be eligible for the grant, you do have to be listed on the Register of Historic Kansas Places, the state register, but as long as that listing has happened either at the meeting or before when the grants are awarded, that's the critical point. So Pam, I don't remember where your guys' application is for the hotel, but if you're just waiting on the National Register office and the application's already been through our Historic Sites Board of Review, then you're good to go. So other folks may have similar questions about that. Father Jerome asked about in cases like with a Catholic church, the owner might be the bishop or a diocese. Who needs to be on the application as the applicant or the contact? I just explained that the owner is always the applicant, but the project contact can be whomever is chosen by the owner. So that could be like the pastor, or it could be someone else that is just the point of contact. And then someone also asked about registration cost for the SAM system, and there is no registration cost for that.
And if you get on a website that has a cost it's not legitimate. So it's sam.gov. Thanks for answering those, Katrina. All good questions. The next section is talking about public benefit and support. Part of the state statute requires that applicants demonstrate the potential benefit to the community and the state, as well as community support for the project. So in these two questions, be sure to summarize how much support you have from the community, and then back it up with your support letters in the attachments later in the application. And demonstrate their support, and you can summarize their letters too in this section. And then talking about preservation plan, like what is the plan for the historic property once the work is complete? How will it be used? Is there going to be a community benefit or impact from the project? This is your area to include that information. The next section talks about the current condition and the preservation work needed. Again, we go back to the state statute that created the grant. The grant committee needs to consider the condition of the property, the urgency of the preservation work proposed. And often the urgency piece is the most critical to the grant committee. If the need isn't urgent, then why should they recommend funding it now? Again, this is a highly competitive grant. About quarter of the applicants each year get funded. We generally have about $1 million to grant out, which if everyone gets $100,000, that's only about 10 grants. In this section, you kind of want to briefly describe how the property came to be in its current condition. Say you are a new owner, previous owners may have neglected work, so you can describe that in here. What are the causes of the current problems? Maybe you have a roof leak and the water infiltration is impacting the entire building inside. How has the property been maintained by you or a past property owner? Say there is that roof leak, you can put in here, we put a roof on the project or on the property, but we need funding to repair interior problems that the water created. Describe the most urgent current preservation need, and usually this is exterior envelope projects, but could be interior, like in the roof example. And then explain how that need ranks against other issues that may be facing the property. Say, we're going to go back to that roof leak scenario. You put a roof on it. You are asking for funding to repair the floor system for stability. And then you're going to continue to build out and do interior finishes after the grant to get the building up and running. So those are all stories you can tell in this section. Okay, talking about why the property is endangered. This question also has to do with urgency. You want to state your case as to why current conditions are endangering the property. Another statute requirement is that the committee consider whether or not the property is endangered when they are selecting grant projects. Is development encroaching on the property? Is there erosion that is a significant threat? Is the building suffering from a lack of maintenance by previous owners? What evidence is there of deterioration? Is the building threatened by poor construction issues? You want to clearly explain how your proposed project will address the endangered issue and protect the property for future generations. Sources of funding. So have you utilized other grants, tax credits, personal savings, etc., on previous repairs, maintenance, or other major projects on the property? What other sources of funding are available for this project? Are you applying for other grants, loans, state or federal tax credits? And then if the project isn't eligible for other funding sources, you'll want to explain that here. For example, say you are wanting to do erosion control around the foundation. That's outside the building footprint, so it wouldn't be eligible for tax credits. So that is something that you would want to put in here. Continuing on that line of questions, you can include that if the project is ineligible for other sources, there's a question for that. You want to state your case, why you need this grant and why the grant committee should fund your request over other applicants. And then it talks about cash flow and funding available. As noted earlier, the cash on hand for your project is critical to maintain cash flow. Explain how you plan to pay for contractors as work proceeds, and then seek reimbursement from the HTF grant. You'll want to provide documentation such as promises of a loan or bank statements in the upload section of the application below. For the budget section, please read the section carefully. This is a reimbursement program. You need to have at least enough cash on hand to cover the bills as they come due. And then keep in mind, some projects cannot be split up into similar or into smaller pieces. For example, a new roof. It's difficult to break that into smaller pieces. But you may be able to, in the example on this slide, north windows, south windows. So in this example, your roof is $40,000, your north windows are $10,000, and then your south windows are $15,000. So your subtotal is $65,000. You're going to want to have a contingency, and that's $13,000 for a total of $78,000. You're going to take 80% of that number for your grant request, which is $62,400. And I'm going to break it down a little bit more. Below that in the application is the budget line items and the cost associated. At least one proposed budget line item is required. The form allows up to 6 items, and we encourage applicants to focus their project down to those 5 to 6 line items and request grant funds for the most urgent preservation concerns. Sometimes it can be overwhelming for the grant committee when there's everything that needs to be done included on the application. Competitive bidding is required for any work that's over $5,000 that is being funded by the grant. So for example, if you have architects doing some planning work ahead of the grant, you don't need to do competitive bidding for the architect, but then the work that's being proposed would require competitive bidding. And the work that's included in these budget line items needs to follow the Secretary of Interior standards. If you have questions on whether something you have proposed is going to meet the standards, you can contact us with questions. So this form will automatically calculate the subtotal of the construction cost that you included in the line items, and contingency, which is 20% of the construction total, not the consultant. Contingency funds are not related to the 20% match. They're added to the budget to provide cushion in case of unforeseen challenges, like higher than expected bids, or once you're into it, maybe an unknown issue with deterioration of building materials. And then if your project will require services of an architect or engineer that you want to have reimbursed by the grant, you'll want to include those under the consultant fees. The form will auto-calculate the total project cost with the construction subtotal, the contingency, and the consultant fees. And then as the applicant, you must enter the grant request. For most applicants, that's going to be the 80%, for a cost up to a maximum of $100,000. For-profit corporations must figure the grant request at 50% of the project total up to $100,000. And then be sure to indicate when you think the project will be completed. As noted, physical work likely won't begin before June of 2025. And then we do like projects to be completed within 2 years of award, just to keep the funds we have available moving through projects. We want projects that are ready to go. And then if you have more than 6 line items, or you have any miscellaneous attachments regarding the budget, you can attach them below. I'm going to pause because that's a lot. Are there questions regarding the budget section?
Bethany, I'm answering a few things in the chat. You might read through and see if there's anything you want to address. If you have access to that. If not, I can read them off.
I do. It looks like you're answering them, and I think we'll kind of get through some of these. So here's an example of a sample project schedule, budget, and scope of work. This is how you might organize the grant budget. So for example, you have masonry repair. You can explain what is going into that masonry repair, what the estimated costs are, and when it might be completed. And so on for the roof, windows and doors, and then if you have a consultant architect working. So as you can see in red, the 3 costs get totaled into the subtotal. Then you're going to take the work being done by your consultant. Can you see my arrow?
Move it again. Yes, I can see it.
Okay, so this number is going to go into your consultant fees. This number is your 20% of the construction costs. So all of that is going to add up to $93,916. You're going to take 80% of that, and that's going to be a grant request of $74,332. And then here's another example of how reimbursement might look for a grant applicant seeking reimbursement. So you're going to want to have an invoice from your contractor who completed, say, the west side windows. They bill you $10,000. You have a contract with your contractor to have your own retainage until their project is complete of 10%. So you're going to pay the contractor $9,000. Your proof of payment is going to be $9,000 to the contractor. We are going to reimburse 80% of the $10,000. We're not going to hold it against you for withholding a retainage. So we're going to withhold our own retainage of 10%. So 10% of $8,000 is $800. So then the reimbursement amount is going to be $7,200. A little bit more on the retainage. If you choose to withhold your own retainage with contractors, we recommend 5 to 10%, which is common. This allows you as the grantee to have some assurance that the project will be completed to your satisfaction and to the grant's satisfaction. Reimbursement requests require 100% complete. A line item needs to be 100% complete. It needs to be a scope of work item within your grant agreement and within the grant period. The work needs to meet the Secretary of Interior standards. We need to have photos documenting the work that you are seeking reimbursement for. We need any bills, invoices, requisitions, and then proof of payment, receipt statements, checks. Setup fees, material purchase, and partial work are not eligible for reimbursement. We can only reimburse once the work is complete. So say your contractor sends you an invoice for the purchase of roofing materials. We can't reimburse for the roofing materials, but once the roof is installed, we can reimburse for that. It may be easier for your contractor to do work in a different way than you have in your line items. So work with asking your contractor to do the work on the line items in your budget may mean the cost is higher upfront. So they may suggest that they take out all the windows in one invoice and bring them back to their studio to work, and they'll bill you for that, but that's not going to be an eligible expense for reimbursement. That's why in the window example, we recommend doing different sections of whole windows. So say you need to do the windows on one side of your building. You could say the first floor is one line item and the second floor windows are a second line item. Or you can divide them up into like north side, west side, however you need to cash flow your project, is how is best for you to work on it. Again, we do require competitive bidding. Non-competitive, directly negotiated contracts may be approved by grant staff on a case-by-case basis. This could be because of like a single source. Say you have a Vitrolite storefront. There's only a handful of folks who do that. So that may be a case where you can directly negotiate. Or once you go through the competitive process and don't get any bids back, you've gone through the competitive process, you can then directly solicit contracts with contractors. And then you also need to provide proof of that bidding process to submit to us to make sure that you are going through it. There is an appendix A and B at the end of the program information talking about the competitive bidding process. Okay, so now we're into the attachment section of the application. We do need to have evidence of property ownership, whether that is a deed, something from your county appraiser. If you are a county government, that may be a different document than a typical owner. Whatever you have that shows that you own the property, and we need the legal description included, not the abbreviated legal description that you get on a property record card. You may have to talk to your county appraiser to get the deed for your property that has you as the owner and your legal description. So you'll upload that here. And then documentation of funding available. So is that a loan agreement? Is it cash savings? Is it another grant? You'll upload that here. And then letters of support, you have the ability to upload at least, or you have the ability to upload 6 letters. We require at least 1 letter of support. This is showing community support that you've described earlier in the application. While letters from Congress people and politicians are sometimes effective, letters from people with personal connection to the property generally have a greater impact to the grant committee. And also I will mention that if you are seeking a letter of recommendation or a letter of support from a elected official, make sure that the letters are sent directly to you and not to us, because you as the applicant need to upload them to the application. We don't attach the letters to the application that we receive in our office. And then we want you to provide up to 20 images of the property. It's best if you can do it in a single PDF. They should show the existing conditions and the concerns that you're applying for. I'm going to go into a further explanation, continuing on. So no more than 20 images. Choose your file name and label carefully. Make sure the photos show features and how they relate to the items in your line items budget section. And then be aware of the quality of your photos. Photos can be of the historic building, or they can be a historic photo in the case of reconstructing a feature or to show the level of deterioration. Photographs need to be in color and they must show the architectural features clearly. The applicant is the sole responsible for clarity of photos and photocopies. And then awarded grantees will be asked to provide JPEG formatted photos for our records. We recommend having an overall shot of your property. We call it the 3-corner shot. Photos taken from the corner of the property will allow the viewer to see not only the front facade, but one side of another part of the building, or showing some part of the context or environment around the building. We do encourage showing close-ups of the damage and deterioration. You may use arrows or circle items, label every photo and the work items shown. To complete your application, please include photos that document work that is needed. The photos should show areas that work is required. Feel free to get creative with photos. You can use pencils, rulers, straight edges, photos of buckets that are catching water from your leaky roof, carpenter's levels to show uneven floors might be needed to better illustrate the problems. And call out the problems in the notes or file name. Like I said, get creative with the photos submitted. You can feel free to use lifts or drones or other means to show damage and deterioration that may be otherwise hard to reach. Grant reviewers are looking through up to 45 to 60 applications. So piling multiple images onto one page may cause more confusion than clarity, like the example on the left. And make sure your photos aren't blurry like the photo on the right. The grant reviewers use the photos to familiarize themselves with the project. And if they can't see what is needed, then how are they going to know that you are in need of a grant? Also, be careful to show details with perspective in relation to other objects and features. A close-up photo of a white plaster wall doesn't convey much to the grant committee. Are there questions on the photo section?
I don't see any right now.
Okay. So the last part of the application is the assurances, which we have a link in the website, grant website of the assurances that you can kind of read through. I want to note especially assurance number 5. Grantees are expected to pay all project costs and then seek reimbursement for a portion of them. It says the grantee attests to they have sufficient funds to match the Heritage Trust Fund grant and will pay all project costs as they come due, then seek reimbursement by KSHS upon completion of approved budget line items. And then number 6 says they will follow the guidelines established by the KSHS, the HTF project agreement, and the Heritage Trust Fund grant manual. You are required to maintain ownership of the property for 5 years following the completion of the project. And if for some reason you have to sell your property, we require a repayment in a prorated by the year out from the project it is. So further thoughts, we encourage you to have someone who's not familiar with the project read through your application to make sure that it makes sense to an outside viewer. Has your application convinced the grant reviewers? We are here to help you whether you receive the grant or not. Every building tells a story. You're competing with many others who have equally important projects, so tell your story and convince the reviewers why your project is best. Best wishes and good luck. Here's my contact information. I'm Bethany Falvey, the Heritage Trust Fund Grants Manager. We've got our my direct line, extension 226. You can also send emails to the Historic Preservation Office email, which is here, kshs.shpo@ks.gov. And then again, that grant website is kshs.org/14617.
Bethany, I just answered a question. Someone was asking about the, will the PowerPoint be shared? And I was just explaining that a recording, since we are recording it, will be posted on the Heritage Trust Fund workshop page. I gave the link there. Are the slides posted anywhere else, or do we usually do that, or would it be available for someone who asked?
I usually try to post it to our agency YouTube page also. And that's what I use to link onto our website. So you should be able to access it from the website or from YouTube.
Okay. I think I've answered most of the questions in the chat. Please give me a hands up or another chat if I've missed your question, or raise your hand if you have additional questions.
I'm not seeing any hands. So I appreciate you guys taking the time to attend the workshop. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out and we will do our best to assist you with your project. The application deadline is November 1st. We encourage you to start early, especially because who knows with technology if there's going to be an issue. So again, thank you for attending and good luck with your grant applications.